The corridor on the 7th floor was dimly lit by flickering torches as James Potter paused, running a hand through his perpetually messy hair. His wand was tucked into the pocket of his robes. He had been expecting Filch or perhaps even a ghostly Peeves ambush. But the corridor was silent, and James could sense something different in the air tonight, a sort of charged stillness that made his heart pound. Sirius Black stood a few steps behind, arms folded in an attempt to look casual. He had a habit of leaning into mischief whenever James got that look on his face, the look that meant a new secret was only moments from being uncovered. Remus Lupin lingered by the wall, caught between caution and curiosity, while Peter Pettigrew hovered near James's elbow, looking for any cue about what to do next. The four of them had snuck out of the Gryffindor common room past curfew, which was hardly unusual, but this evening's mission held a tantalizing prospect. A rumor of a hidden chamber somewhere along the 7th floor corridor. They had overheard a pair of 5th-year Ravenclaws whispering about a strange door that only appears when you need it, and a hush had fallen over the Marauders' table in the Great Hall. James's brow had furrowed. Sirius's eyes sparkled. Remus raised an eyebrow, more thoughtful than excited, yet still intrigued, and Peter looked on in awe, as though they were discussing a grand treasure. They had decided that evening, just after dinner, to find out for themselves whether the rumor was just a bit of creative nonsense or a genuine pathway to unexplored mischief. "I'm sure it's here," James whispered. He paced back and forth, certain that the corridor was harboring some kind of secret. "I heard it's near that tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy teaching trolls to dance. Blimey, look at that thing." He gestured at an ancient tapestry that depicted a frantic wizard in pink robes, attempting to lead a horde of trolls through a particularly chaotic ballet. Sirius stifled a laugh, giving the tapestry a quick once-over, while Remus sighed, already half-sure James's lead would yield something bizarre. But then, the unexpected happened. A door began to materialize on the stretch of wall opposite the tapestry. One moment it was bare stone, the next it shimmered, as though the bricks were rearranging themselves. It was a quiet magic, no dramatic clanging or bright flashes of light, just a subtle shift until a sturdy wooden door with ornate iron hinges stood before them. James's eyes widened. "That's it," he hissed excitedly, half fearing the door might vanish if he spoke too loudly. He grasped the handle and pulled it open with a grin that spoke of triumph and a pinch of mischief. Inside, the four of them peered into darkness. A moment later, torches within the chamber burst into flame, revealing a large, inviting space. The Marauders glanced at one another, then stepped through the threshold with hushed enthusiasm, hearts hammering in anticipation. They found themselves standing in what looked like a cozy workshop, or perhaps a lounge that had been adapted for a handful of troublemakers. There were plush armchairs arranged around a circular table, a large trunk in the corner that was slightly ajar, and a wide expanse of shelves stacked with old books, potions vials, and other curious trinkets. The ceiling was high, supported by wooden beams, and there was a sense of playful warmth in the air. It was as if the room was inviting them to explore every nook and cranny, to discover what it had conjured in response to their desire for a hidden place to plan their pranks. "Merlin's beard," Sirius breathed, examining the shelves. He snatched up a small notebook lying near a pile of quills. "Do you reckon this place just appears when you need it? All set and ready, like it's your own private hideout?" Remus nodded slowly, a thoughtful finger on his chin. "That's what the rumor said. The room of requirement, they call it. It transforms itself to suit your needs, as long as you know how to summon it." He walked along the shelves, eyes scanning the spines of books that looked as though they had never been opened. "And apparently, it can store everything you might require for whatever you intend to do." Peter bobbed his head enthusiastically, then scurried across to the open trunk in the corner. Inside, he found blank parchment, flasks of ink, a few unrecognizable objects, and even a dusty old cloak. "Think of the possibilities," he exclaimed, picking up the cloak to see if it was enchanted. He let it fall back into the trunk when it turned out to be just dusty cloth, but the excitement in his voice remained. James's mind raced with ideas. This was no ordinary secret passage or narrow crawl space behind the tapestry. This was a shape-shifting room that could become anything they wished. A sly grin formed on his face, and he looked at Sirius. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" Sirius returned the grin. "I'm thinking this might be an excellent place to brew illicit potions, or hide from Snape, or both." Remus rolled his eyes, though he was already imagining the possibilities for quieter study sessions, away from prying eyes. And that trunk full of suspiciously blank parchment? It might be a goldmine for their mischief-making. "We'll have to be careful," he warned. "We can't let everyone know about this place, or else it won't be so secret for long." The four of them, newly energized, set about investigating every detail. The shelves were lined with dusty tomes, some blank and awaiting instruction, others filled with arcane knowledge, presumably to help them accomplish whatever they might dream up. A few vials contained glimmering liquids, and none of the Marauders were entirely sure what they did. But that only added to the room's mystery. There were tall windows, too, which was impossible since the corridor faced inward to the castle. These windows merely showed the swirling night sky outside, reflecting the chamber's desire to be a comfortable place, complete with a serene view. Over the next few weeks, the Marauders made the room of requirement their meeting spot of choice. The discovery remained their secret, one that had them scurrying upstairs after dinner, each time hoping the corridor would be empty so they could slip inside unnoticed. More than once, Filch's footsteps echoed behind them, but they quickly darted into shadows or under James's invisibility cloak, hearts in their throats until the caretaker plodded away. They spent hours refining new pranks to unleash on the castle, safe within those magically conjured walls. Occasionally, they brainstormed ideas for the Marauders' map in there, discussing spells that might reveal each corridor and occupant of Hogwarts in real time. Remus would page through volumes that the room provided, books on advanced magical cartography, concealment charms, and illusions, while James and Sirius shot new hexes at a battered suit of armor in the corner, another piece the room had helpfully provided, to see how they might incorporate them into future escapades. Peter took fastidious notes on bits of parchment, though whether he understood everything he wrote down was debatable. And it wasn't just about mischief. When the full moon drew close, Remus found himself growing anxious, his body aching as it prepared for transformation. By the afternoon of each full moon's eve, his face grew wan, and dark circles formed under his eyes. He tried to hide it, but his friends had long known about his condition. Because they cared so fiercely, they had already chosen the enigmatic path, a daring bit of magic to ease Remus's pain and keep him company in wolf form. The room of requirement, sensing their secret, had begun to leave subtle hints in corners. Texts about magical beasts, enchanted locks, cushions on the floor as if to soften any potential collisions. It was as though the room itself empathized with Remus's plight and wanted to make it easier. One evening, when Sirius insisted on exploring the possibility of conjuring a safe enclosure, the room obliged. It expanded into a space reminiscent of the Shrieking Shack's battered interior, providing a smaller, padded area lined with thick protective barriers. They never actually brought Remus there for his transformations. Dumbledore had arranged the use of the Whomping Willow and the secret passage to the Shrieking Shack for that purpose, but it comforted them to know the room was aware of Remus's needs. It felt almost like having an extra friend in on the secret, one who would keep them safe without a word of judgment. All the while, the tension between the Marauders and Severus Snape simmered. The pair of them, James and Sirius especially, thrived on tormenting the solitary Slytherin. It was mostly petty jinxes, hexes that ruffled Snape's hair or made his cauldron fizz over in class. Snape, in turn, tried to uncover their secrets, prowling the library and corners of the castle in search of a slip-up that might give him leverage. The room of requirement, ever discreet, evaded Snape's detection. He might have noticed the Marauders heading up to the 7th floor, but on every attempt to follow them, the corridor looked as unremarkable as any other. Late one autumn night, James and Sirius decided to do something impossible: build an elaborate trick staircase that appeared and disappeared at random. They had set about drafting it in the room of requirement, flipping through advanced illusions textbooks. Peter scurried to fetch them coffee from the kitchens, one of his typical tasks to show loyalty. Meanwhile, Remus watched from an armchair, occasionally suggesting they refine their plan so that fewer unsuspecting students got caught. "We only want to prank certain people," Remus said, cocking his head. "We don't want to cause a first year to break an arm just because they were in the wrong stairwell at the wrong time." James waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, come on, Mooney. Anyone who looks where they're going should be safe." But he paused, glancing at the mischief on Sirius's face. "We'll be careful," he conceded. "Just a bit of innocent chaos, that's all." The night wore on, and the boys found themselves laughing over half-eaten pumpkin pasties they had spirited away. They doodled sketches of trick steps and illusions across reams of blank parchment. Every so often, the room replenished their parchment supply or offered a new stack of colored quills that sparkled when used. The hush around them felt conspiratorial. It was moments like these that cemented their bond, brothers in everything but blood, working together on pranks that would one day become legendary. Yet, beyond the jokes and the plotting, there were quieter uses for the room of requirement. One chilly day in December, Remus entered the room alone. He had intended to meet James and Sirius for a routine brainstorming session, but they were late. As he crossed the threshold, he found an entirely different space than usual. This time it was a warm, simple study with large windows, again, allusions to the outside world, softly glowing lamps, and a comforting fireplace crackling in the corner. There was a single desk, a half-finished essay on advanced defensive magic, and a large tapestry depicting a wolf under a full moon. It was as though the room sensed Remus's weight of worry, his longing for calm and acceptance. He sat down, letting the crackle of the flames soothe his troubled mind. The transformation was coming soon, and every month brought anxiety about being discovered or hurting someone inadvertently. He had tried to keep it all under wraps. Only the Marauders and Dumbledore, and presumably Madame Pomfrey, knew the truth. But it was nerve-wracking nonetheless. Here, in this conjured sanctuary, he let his guard down. He found a quill waiting for him and wrote in a private journal he'd hidden under his pillow in the dormitory. Somehow, the room had known to provide the journal, ready to be found on the desk. For a moment, Remus felt Hogwarts itself cared for him. It was quite a comfort. In the weeks that followed, their illusions and magical mischief soared to new heights. With the help of the Room of Requirement, they built prototypes for trick objects that they snuck into the corridors. One such invention was the laughing quill, an innocent-looking feather that erupted into hysterical laughter whenever someone tried to write a test answer with it. Professors grew suspicious, none more so than Professor McGonagall, who watched them like a hawk, but the Marauders always had an alibi or a secret path back to the 7th floor. They installed a miniature Quidditch pitch inside the Room of Requirement for private practice on rainy days. The space wasn't full-sized, of course. It was more like a scaled-down version with floating rings and a set of specially enchanted practice quaffles. James soared around on his broom, practicing maneuvers for the Gryffindor team, while Sirius attempted to outfly him. Remus mostly cheered from the sidelines, and Peter tried valiantly but inevitably lagged behind, struggling to keep pace. The room provided soft cushioning whenever someone tumbled off a broom, as though unwilling to let any real harm come to them. Eventually, the group realized just how far the room could go in supporting them. One day, James asked for a place to practice powerful spells, dueling spells even, that they wouldn't risk performing in a normal classroom. The room obliged by transforming into a small, stone-walled dueling hall. Suits of armor lined each side, and a protective barrier shimmered in front of the walls. Their wands sparked in the low torchlight. Sirius whooped when he sent a crackling jinx right past James's ear. Remus practiced carefully, determined not to let his transformations hinder his skill. Peter mostly scurried about, trying not to get caught in crossfire, but he did improve his reaction times. Sirius teased that even the most timid mouse can learn to dodge a hawk if it tries often enough. Yet the more they used the Room of Requirement, the more they risked being caught. Filch had noticed unusual footprints on the 7th floor corridor. Peeves had started haranguing them, turning cartwheels in midair and singing off-key rhymes about Potty, Padfoot, and their puffy pals, which nearly alerted a passing professor or two. Even the house elves who cleaned Hogwarts at night suspected there was an overabundance of footprints outside a certain tapestry, so they scrubbed more vigorously there, raising suspicion. One afternoon, Snape lingered around that part of the castle, eyes narrowed. James and Sirius, hiding under the invisibility cloak, held their breath as Snape paced back and forth, evidently trying to sense some magic. Snape paused in front of the tapestry, glaring at the wall. For a moment, a flicker of triumph crossed his features. He must have felt the invisible door's presence, but the magic refused to yield to him. By the time he tried a revealing charm, the corridor was silent, and the Marauders had slipped away, hearts hammering. They scrambled down a spiral staircase, adrenaline coursing through their veins. Remus, exasperated by how close they came to discovery, urged caution. "We can't be that careless. One slip and it won't just be Snape, Filch, or a teacher might catch us. Or worse, Dumbledore might figure out that we're up to something truly out of bounds." But Sirius, in typical fashion, shrugged, wearing a grin that said it was worth the risk. For James's part, he was torn between caution and the thrill of having that secret sanctuary that bent to their wishes. Still, after that close call, they used the room more sparingly and tried to misdirect prying eyes. They'd discuss pranks in the common room under low voices, or in empty classrooms, then only finalize them in the room of requirement when they were certain no one was trailing them. They took turns scouting the corridor before making the door appear. Peter was especially adept at darting around corners, straining his ears for the telltale footsteps of Filch, or the swish of a cloak that might be Snape. Then, once the coast was clear, James would walk 3 times in front of the tapestry, concentrating on the specific space they needed. A planning room, a dueling chamber, a cozy lounge, and the door would appear. Over time, the Marauders started leaving small tokens inside the room, mementos that nobody else would understand. A photograph of them by the Black Lake, hooting with laughter. A broken bit of chalk from the day they used the room to practice complicated charms theories. A battered wizard's chess piece that had been cracked during a heated game. It became a place that was more than just a tool for pranks. It was a safe haven where they could be themselves, unobserved by the rest of Hogwarts. Sirius would sometimes lounge in one of the armchairs, reading a bit of contraband wizarding comic books. James might polish his broom, dreaming of the next big Quidditch match. Remus might tidy up, making sure the more dangerous items were stored properly, ever the responsible one. And Peter, in his own jittery way, would watch them with admiration, proud to be part of their circle. Perhaps the greatest exploit to spring from the room of requirement came in their 5th year, when they were on the cusp of finishing the Marauders map. They had all the puzzle pieces ready, the footprints, the dynamic labeling, the secret passages, and they needed a space to finalize the spell that would make it impossible for teachers or other meddlesome figures to unlock its secrets. They retreated to the room for an entire Saturday, armed with chocolate frogs, piles of parchment, and an unwavering sense of determination. The chamber stretched into a large library-like space, with ample floor room for them to spread out. They took turns chanting incantations, tracing runes, and testing the incantation that would prompt the map's unveiling. "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good." Sirius nearly fell over laughing when, for an embarrassing moment, they reversed a line of the spell, causing the text to scramble itself into nonsense. But they persevered. By sundown, the battered bit of parchment in front of them began to glow with a faint, brilliant light. Words sparkled into being at the top. Messrs. Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs, purveyors of aids to magical mischief makers, are proud to present the Marauders map. The 4 of them exchanged looks of utter exhilaration, though Remus quickly insisted they test the map's security features. Sure enough, a few raps of a wand and the phrase "mischief managed" caused the parchment to revert to a blank page. They erupted into cheers, high-fiving and hugging one another. They had done it, and the room of requirement had been their silent conspirator. That night, as they left the room, the door faded away behind them, blending back into the stone wall. For a moment, they felt a rush of gratitude, each in their own way. Without the sanctuary, without the endless supply of knowledge and curious objects, their map and half their legendary pranks would never have been possible. In time, the Marauders graduated. Life grew more complicated, the war outside Hogwarts intensifying. Their cheerful, irreverent days in the castle transformed into memories that they clutched at when the darkness of the outside world closed in. The Room of Requirement, that secret place, became a symbol of the boundless possibilities of youth, when the greatest concerns were how to outwit Filch or best Snape in a petty duel. They would never forget the hours spent laughing beneath the enchanted torches, scouring forbidden books on illusions, or polishing their wands for duels. Decades later, if one were to walk down the 7th floor corridor, the tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy would still hang there, trolls dancing in silent pandemonium. Sometimes, under just the right circumstances, the bricks across from that tapestry might shift, revealing a door. A determined student, in need of a place to learn, hide, or plan, could open that door and find a new iteration of the Room of Requirement. And somewhere, hidden in its countless forms, might still lie a chipped chess piece, or a dog-eared comic book left behind by 4 mischievous boys who once called themselves the Marauders. That is the tale of how James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew discovered the Room of Requirement during their years at Hogwarts, forging memories and mischief within its ever-changing walls. Though their time in Hogwarts passed, the echoes of their laughter and the footprints of their teenage exploits remained, woven into the castle's timeless magic. And for those who dare to look, the traces of their pranks and inventions might still surface at the most unexpected of moments, reminding future generations that Hogwarts' secrets are vast, and that true friendship and mischief leaves a mark that can never quite fade.